Okay. Okay, so it is 3:02 on March 26th. And I'll call to order our Economic Opportunity Advisory Board meeting. Opening items, welcome, everyone. I know we'll have a couple of other guests joining us. Like I think James Dixon from the GOYO office will be on for at least a little while with us in case we have any questions to ask him. Deborah, thank you for joining us today too. Stephen Stocks, our county attorney, is around also to support us and make sure we don't make any bad decisions about how to move forward with this grant process. So yeah, thanks to everybody for joining us today. Let's just go around and do quick introductions, and then we can jump into a very full meeting that we have. Jasmine, would you mind starting?
Jasmine Duncan.
I am doing the minutes for this one.
That would be amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Aaron.
Good job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jasmine Duncan, voting member of this board, Mayor of Tulsa Valley. Melody McCandless, Grant County Commissioner, non-voting.
Aaron member, private citizen.
Deborah McKee Goyo. Cora Phillips, Director of the Moab Chamber of Commerce.
Congratulations.
And congratulations.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Forrest Rogers and
Melissa Jeffers, member of the board. Brittany Melton, member.
Randy Martin, representing the Moab Area Chamber of Commerce.
Stephen Stocks, County Attorney. Mark Tanner, and Commission Administrator.
Quinn Hall. Commission Admin Office.
Dana Van Horn, Commissioner Admin Office.
Okay, Chris Wilson, member of the board. Do we have, it looks like Alexi is online. We're just doing introductions, Alexi. Or Corey.
Sorry, yeah. Alexi Lam, I'm the Strategic Initiatives and Sustainability Director for the City of Moab. I am filling in for Corey Shartleff.
Thanks for joining us. Great, so done introductions. Just create a space for any conflicts of interest to be spoken, or any disclosures, any ex parte communication that needs to be disclosed. Here.
So, and just a reminder, if people are connected to any of the applicants, if you're family members of the applicants, ownership interest of the applicants, representative of the applicants, if there's any application that you're know of a director, partially indirect connection, it's best to disclose it. I can let you know if it'll trigger a restricted conflict. Say, for example, if it was me and my law office had applied, I'd say I have a restricted conflict because my private entity applied. But let's say if my dad applied, I would say, hey, family member applied, etc. Best practice is to disclose, and even if it doesn't trigger, the regular level, we have commissioners sometimes, like Commissioner McCurdy, his wife works for the sheriff's department. He says, hey, just letting everybody know my wife works for the sheriff department.
Right. So we have several recusals that have taken place during the scoring process.
Yep, and they note it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they note it now.
Okay. All right.
I didn't recuse, but I do have a direct friend and business partner who is the Beacon After School Director.
I recused from the Moab Museum application.
I have an employee that applied through, I can't remember what it's called, Red Rock Plunge or something along those lines.
I will recuse from the Moab Chamber of Commerce application and the Grant County EMS application.
And I don't know, do I have to recuse on the chamber? I don't.
So
Because I am a
she's on
member of the board.
Oh, yeah, and it'd be best practice. to
Okay.
do that.
I'll recuse. And I think Ashley would be the same. I don't,
She is, and she has.
oh, okay. Like,
Yeah, and how, conflicts of interest law in the state work, it's best to, over disclose than under disclose. Because over disclosing it's, well, okay, we can know that it was best intent was to comply with it. And recusal is necessary when it's a restricted conflict, which is a heightened level, which is that possessory interest. So even if like my bestest of friends had a business, I don't have a restricted conflict, but if my household member, if somebody lived in my household and they applied, that would be a conflict. So there's varying shades of it. When in doubt, disclose, and then it also provides additional context so that people understand, oh, okay, they're recusing because X, Y.
So the chamber ones would just be disclosing, not necessarily accusing.
Unless I would say, if you're looking at the executive board or the, president position, things like that, that would probably be more heightened scrutiny. Because then if you're looking at any, so for example, taking we'll use a different nonprofit, Seahaven, using Seahaven. If Abby Taylor, who's the executive director, who receives funding from Seahaven as an entity, if that item was on there, it would look weird and it would probably be a restricted conflict because those funds coming into her employer would be closer. Whereas maybe somebody that volunteers occasionally with Seahaven wouldn't have that same connection. Does that make sense?
As long as we're splitting legal hairs
Yeah.
and talking philosophically, I do think one of the challenges that I would like to be clear about too is that there are two responsibilities of the board. One of them is to vote, right, according to the bylaws. The other one is to be able to inform, educate, support, help.
Yes.
I have helped so many of these applicants and
Yes.
have been prepared in so many of them and had hours and hours and hours of conversation with a lot of these folks. I don't know them from Adam. We're not friends. We're not business partners, associates, have never, will never work together. But they all get pushed my direction so that we can have these conversations. But those are two responsibilities that are outlined in the bylaws. So I think it's really important to call that out too, because I want to split that legal hair.
Sure. And the difference there between those, and normally I don't see, and on this one, there is ex parte communication. I mean, that's a different box than a conflict of interest. Now, normally we don't see conflict of interest on the list. Like, for example, the planning and zoning department has, a robust ex parte communication provision, but the commission doesn't. So just a distinction there. I don't know if ex parte communication is on there for that reason, or if there's something.
Only on there because we've been asked to call it out.
Yeah,
whether we
and
need
so
it or not
that-
is something we can
Yeah, and that one probably makes it like. I don't know if that's the intent to have it on there, because then. It makes it more of a headache, because then if you were like, if I talked to using Seahaven, and did Seahaven apply?
Yes, yes.
Okay, different example. Habitat for Humanities. Did Habitat for Humanities work? Okay, Habitat for Humanities. If I talked with Habitat for Humanities and said, hey, look, the board wants to highlight X, Y, and Z. Maybe at a certain point, like background information, I think I'm good. But if I said, hey, the Tiger King is on this board and he really likes tigers in captivity. And I said that that's kind of one of his preferences. I think then you're looking at crossing the line of ex parte communication where you're giving more information or more support or more information to that one person. But if you're like generally, hey, here's the website, here's the information on it. I think you need to include the financial and the goals and this and that, and generally like background. That's different than the ex parte communication of like, when you're looking at P and Z, like, hey, I want to understand your project. Let's get down in the nitty gritty and let's talk about things that the public wouldn't have had access to. If you find yourself considering something in the application that isn't there, Habitat for Humanities, maybe they said that they want to build more homes, but you know that they're going to build more homes in this area and that's desirous, and you're using outside information, that's the ex parte communication that we don't want. Or if you're going to provide in the discussion something that they didn't provide in their packet, that would be something that crosses the line of the ex parte communication. I just noticed that on there. That is, there is, and Ms. Jeffers has it correct, that is a difference, and that is, legal splitting hairs on a difference between conflict of interest versus ex parte communication, and then disclosures are mixed in there. Right? So if I've made the topic confusing enough.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay,
So I have recused myself from the applications with Artesian and YGP because of some business that I've done with those organizations. Do we have any further disclosures and things to make?
I was just gonna say Zach Rainey, I think it's high desert solutions. Sometimes works for me. Boy. I've done work for like the golf course, and I've also done a client of Christian Moore.
Thank you.
and one thing you'll notice is there's tons of these conflicts. That's why we have that difference between a restricted conflict, because we live in a town of 10,000 people. So it is very normal to have lots of conflicts. So
Yeah. Great. Yeah, if we had a board that didn't have connections to the business community in Moab, I
Then
think
what
that
would
would be a
be- yeah,
problem.
exactly.
So,
what would be the
I'm
point?
glad we do,
Well said.
in that sense. Are there any citizens to be heard? Hearing none. Presentations? Don't think there was anything. Great. So we're on to discussion action items. Like I said, we have a lot to get done today, so I'm gonna try my best to keep things moving along. First, a few housekeeping items. We have minutes that were part of the packet from January 15th and February 26th. We're still awaiting January 29th minutes. It's part of this switch over to being under comm admin. There's some things that are, getting a little bit behind as we work our way through this process, but they will be here soon. But I'd invite a motion to approve those minutes.
So
Thank you. Is it seconded?
I have a question about this second set of minutes.
Sure.
The subcommittee that we formed. For some reason, I thought it was Brittany and not Ashley. That was.
It was me. I was gonna bring that
Yeah.
up, but I thought you
Thanks.
guys were talking on the January one.
I
you doing
think the
the
movement
January
was for both,
first?
but we can have this, yeah.
Oh, I'm glad that
So
you
we'll
said
make
that.
that-
I missed that.
That was the only change that
I drafted them, but I had forgotten to identify the second. And so, and the other thing is, there were so many people there,
It was a bit confusing.
I had forgotten who was a voting member and who wasn't. So, and I
You
put
did
it,
great.
so we can pass on that one for now, or we can just.
We can just amend that to say
Just
who
make
was
that
in the
amendment.
subcommittee.
Great, so with the amendment that Brittany, rather than Ashley, is in the subcommittee. We'll go ahead and take a vote unless there's a further discussion. Are there issues?
Do I need to vote on that first one? Because I wasn't even a part of that.
I think as a board
Does
member,
it
you're welcome
matter?
to vote.
Oh, okay. I just.
It's
wanted
just
to-
approval of the minutes, I think. Well, or if you'd rather abstain from it, feel free.
I just wanted to make
It's your-
sure. it was
your call.
right.
Great, so I'll call for a vote on the approval of both of the minutes from January 15 and February 26th. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No, unanimously passes. Thank you. Great, so next up, we have the letter of support for the Moab Community Land Trust. Maxwell is with the developer of part of their housing on Arroyo Crossing, are applying for affordable housing tax credits. And they get extra points, a higher likelihood of getting those affordable housing tax credits if they show their support from a local government. Since we, as a board, not with all of these members currently, but as a board in the past, supported, helped to direct a previous RCOG grant to Arroyo Crossing, they're asking us to just put that in writing as a letter of support. And so that letter was in the packet. And so just first see if there are any questions that people have or concerns about it. Yeah.
I'm confused by this. So
Yeah.
it never came to this board. It's basically a letter of support that someone else is handing or giving that grant out.
MACL, the Moab Area Community Land Trust, is asking our board to sign a letter of support. It's really just stating that they previously received county support, in the direction of an RCOG grant to Arroyo Crossing, because that's going to help. That was for horizontal infrastructure for all of Arroyo Crossing development. And so they're asking our board to offer a letter of support so that they have a higher chance of getting these affordable housing tax credits for development on Arroyo Crossing. So they're not asking for money from us or there's nothing
No,
with
I
the
just was
grants or anything like
confused
that.
as
It's
to
just
when it, okay.
having us
Fair.
sign a letter to support them so that they can apply for these federal tax credits.
All right.
Yeah.
I motion we approve this letter of support for Michael.
Thank you, Jasmine. Is there a second? So thank you. So is there further discussion? Great, let's have a vote on approving the letter of support for Michael. All in favor? Aye. Raise your hand. Thank you. Anyone opposed? Great, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, so we're on to the big item, which is the grants, the RCG and the RCOG grants. And Melissa's going to lead this part of the meeting. Before I sort of pass it over to her, I just want to make a couple of comments about the process. First of all, we had a hugely successful call for applications, which is awesome. We had, I think the number is 57 applicants. And I know all of you around this table know that number is a large number when you're going through and reading with care and in detail all of these applications. So yeah, I think that's amazing. And as the result of the great work that the board did in getting, sharing the information, writing the information in the call for applications. So this is, great job, everyone. And thank you for all of that. Yeah, thanks also for taking the time to consider them all very seriously. At a later date, we'll have a discussion about how to improve this process for next year, right? How to manage that in a more streamlined way, the part that we've already gone through. The sort of discussion for today is more focused going forward, right? It's about the next steps in the process, which ones we push, how many and which ones we push forward to this next round of consideration. And so that's a part that Melissa will be guiding us in just a second. But also, you know, as a result of being so successful, there's kind of like more eyes on us than ever as we go through these next stages in the process. There are a lot of people that are, you know, kind of have skin in the game at this point. And so I want to sort of just say to all the applicants, thank you for the time and energy that you guys have put into the process and putting yourself out there. And for the energy that they're trying to put into building the Grand County economy. I think that's amazing and hugely important. And I would just say that like it's really, you know, it's hard for us to move through this process and see really good projects that some of which will not get funded in the end. But we take our responsibility to give them all really good consideration very seriously. And I've already heard sort of conversation on the table about how can we support some of these applications in ways that are outside of this grant process and help people get funding who deserve it? Because unfortunately, we won't be able to fund everyone that deserves it because of the merits of their application. And finally, I just want to say a special thank you to Melissa and to Dana, who stepped out of the room, for their huge number of hours they put in to getting the forms ready, to tabulating the results. It is like there is an immense amount of work and volunteer work going into this process. So yeah, recognize you guys for that. Thank you. So take it away. And I'll share, you tell me when, and I will share on the screens the tabulated results.
Perfect. Okay, I haven't seen it yet. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's the
haven't put it
last
yet.
round. I was in meetings, so sorry. So it'll be surprising to me too. But the next phase of the process, so as everyone knows, we had great response, really excited about that. And I feel like we got a really deep bench and a really deep pipeline too, because there were so many great projects that we would love to work with those moving forward. So I feel like whatever doesn't make this first round or go through the first set of the process, there are so many things that I think probably a lot of the board members, if not all of the board members, feel really passionately that we don't want to let things fall away for sure. But after going through the scoring process, we worked really closely with Quinn and Dana and Mark to make sure that everything was tabulated, recorded, distilled down to the top group. So what Chris and I were going to recommend to the board, and this is, you know, completely however the board wants to handle it. But I don't know how the final shook out, but I think we were looking at roughly the first 9 or 10 projects, total about $2.1 million in ask. And
Just
so
for those 10.
yeah, just
Okay.
for like the top 10. So the whole idea would be for the next stage of the process, one thing that we might want to recommend is we look to see how the scores ranked out. And then we choose how far down on that list that we want to go. And then however far we choose to go down on that list, at that point, the next step of the process would be, we would invite those folks to create a one sheet, more of a detailed budget, come in and present their projects and answer questions of the board, and see if there are some things that strategically we can move and group some things together, or these would be more appropriate for an RCOG grant, or this would be nice to consider for an RCG grant. And that would be the next stage of the process. And then prior to the next meeting, we will have whittled that group down and have more of an idea of how we'd like to move forward with that. And then that last meeting can be dedicated to final decision-making and dressing things up in a format that we feel comfortable making that recommendation to the commission. So that's kind of big picture how we're looking at it. Did I miss?
I think that's great for now. Let's put the
Anything?
results up and let people take a look
So,
at it.
yeah.
And then you can sort of like think through what that process looks like in the context of actual results.
Is there a total ask number that's gonna be on here?
It,
I just like to share the news of.
yeah, one thing I will say about the total ask, you'll see the total ask numbers for each of
Okay.
them individually. We can create a sum, obviously, very
Yeah,
easily.
I'd love to know.
Some of them, I think, are just based on a little bit of like, we will do a better job of clarifying what that
Oh,
number
that's
represents
right.
next year. I think some of people wrote a number there suggesting like the total cost of the project, not what they're necessarily asking for the grant.
Yeah.
And so we'll have more clarity on that in the next stage of the process.
Right,
after we've
yeah.
asked them to do an itemized budget.
Okay, I forgot it was.
But this is, this is,
Can I add just some thoughts before we go through and share all the information? One of the things that we have to be careful about is we haven't created, the process isn't laid out, and this is a good process that's being laid out. I think before we look at the results, it'd probably be a good idea to decide what the next steps in the process are, instead of looking at the results and then maybe people's opinions shift. Because that might be.
okay.
that
Yeah,
might
so
be
let's
why.
talk about
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
because I, in general, agreed with that idea, and we tried to sort of like
Yeah,
think
'cause
that would be the way we would do it.
Yeah, let me add one more thought.
Sure.
We can't tell people not to apply. So if we want to narrow the scope, what we need to tell them, because we can't close the application, we can't tell them that they cannot continue to apply. We can tell them the strength of the application, but for the commission to be able to get a pick of the litter, they have to get a full application. Do you have a question for us?
I'm trying to understand what you just said.
Okay,
In
let
terms
me-
of the process.
Yeah, so for example, if we have a grant and the grant's gonna be open to the community. We can't shut the door on the people we can't gatekeep the final conclusion. So like for example, when there's an application for this board will get 10 applications, right? And you may recommend 3 of the 10. The full 10 go to the commission for them to make the decision. We don't get to narrow it down to one person. So for example, the board couldn't say, we're recommending one application, that's it, you get one application, that's what we recommend, you should pick that one application. It has to be an open process for the commission to pick. So some programs in the state have an already set way of selecting the entirety of the project, like you have a pre-screening process, and then you have the next stage, et cetera. We don't have that, is my understanding, in this process to screen out individual applications. And so if we're going to choose to make the rules, we can. And I think we can highlight, these are the top 10 contenders that are the top 10 strengths, and we like them.
Yeah.
And so what we want to encourage them to continue on the process because we think they're the strongest applications. The other ones can submit a full application to the commission, but these are the 10 that we think are the solid picks, the ones we like. We're going to go with these 10, but we can't just, snub the other ones in the cradle. Like we have to allow them to be an opportunity because maybe the commission's vision is they want underwater basket weaving. And that was one of the 10 options. And they're like, well, we're going to take option number 10 out and put underwater basket weaving instead. So I think you can go through the process. I think you can say, hey, look, we're going to look at strengths of applications. Our next step is going to be that we're going to do the one sheet presentation, these 10, and then we're going to whittle it down to 5. Anybody that gets kicked out, they could be considered.
Yeah,
They can
that's
submit a
fine.
full application. I was talking to another attorney from Salt Lake County. He said the reason why is if we kick them out, we probably would need to create an appellate process.
Yeah, okay.
And so I'm just noting that. So if you guys are good with the process that you've described, I think it's great. I think you guys confirm that and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it going forward. So that we don't see the results. And then all of a sudden people go, no, we don't want to do it that way. We don't want to do the one sheet for the top 10. We want to do it. For
Well,
the
let
top
me
15.
talk to you a little bit about
Yeah,
that
yeah.
part of it. Not that what you just said about them, all of them having the opportunity to apply and
Yeah, yeah.
send to the commission, that sounds totally reasonable to me.
Perfect.
The part that I'm a little unsure about, so like our job, these are 2 different grants. We
Yes.
have a single application process for 2 different grants.
Yes.
So like, for example, if we all sat around the table and said, we'd like to see the top 4 go through,
Mhm.
and then it turned out that there were no projects that met the thresholds or the requirements for the RCOG,
Right.
we might be setting up a process that didn't allow us to have strong applicants in both lanes.
Right.
And
That's
so one of the reasons that it might be helpful for us to see what the threshold
That's
might
fair.
look like is
Yes,
that
that's
we're
fair.
working on a couple of different lanes and we want to pick a number. Or the board could decide a different way of choosing to do this rather than just a single number. But it's hard to make a good decision in the absence of, like, for
That's fair.
example, what if they don't sum up to a sufficient, we already said they sum up to quite a large amount of money, right? What if they didn't, what if they were all $8,000 asks and we picked 10 of them?
Right.
Then we wouldn't have enough money asked for.
No, that's
So
very
we,
fair. That's
we
very
need
fair.
some additional information to be able to make a good decision.
I agree. That's fair. That's very fair.
Can I just ask a question? Because I'm confused.
Okay.
So let me give you an example. I'm better with examples.
Okay.
So I'm 12 on the list, right? Like, let's say that we decide that this person's 12 on the list.
Mhm.
But I know that I can then submit an entire application Because I know this final decision doesn't end here, it goes to the commission.
Sure.
So if I submit that entirety to the commission can then override me or override this board. And it's because I submitted an entire application.
Well, whatever.
Not that I'm trying to say that that's.
No. Whatever, ultimately you need full applications, right? And so when you go through this process, you may identify the top 10, the top 15, right?
Mhm.
We want everyone to make sure, and maybe all 10 go through or all, you know, in a perfect world, all 10 are going to give you everything you need. They might not, they might have lacking. That's why I want to make sure we're encouraging everybody to continue, anybody that wants to continue through files a full application. Because even if you say 10, maybe 3 of them don't apply, and then you're down to 7, but maybe you wanted to consider 10. So we tell them, we're looking at strengths of applications right now, not to say about the final decision, but these are the strong contenders right now. And then we're not killing anybody, because if the government kills the process, then we have to have the right of appeal. And that's gonna make things more complicated.
Well, I think what we'll let them know is that, go ahead.
So I think it's an opportunity, maybe with James Dixon on the line,
Yes.
because I want to advocate for the county here. So I'm going to put on my county hat for just a minute and be on the side of the county commission. It's my understanding, and James, you are absolutely the person to clarify. We're not required to have applications. There's no requirement that we look at applications. And for example, like if we were to take it all the way to the extreme, the county commission could say, here's our strategic plan for economic development for our county. And this is the way that we're gonna go. The only thing that they're statutorily required to do is listen to a recommendation from our board. And as long as we make that recommendation, really applications is like an extra step that we've created in the process, but it's not even necessary. So we could say as a board, hey, we think this would be a good project. Here's what we're recommending to you. And the county commission could say, thank you. We've now discharged our duty in listening to you. And here's what we're going to do instead. And in that scenario, we've met the process. But I think if you were to take it all the way to the extreme of what my understanding is the county commission could already have a 5-year strategic plan in place to decide how they want to fund it. And as long as they listen to a recommendation from this board based on any process that the board went through, that we've then executed our responsibility and they have followed their statutory guideline. Is that
Let's
correct?
James is on, so.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can, thank you.
Okay, great. And I just want to say hello to my new friends, those of you that I just met last week. It was so great to meet with you. Yes, I appreciate your question and your summary. And I think you're absolutely accurate. Let me throw in a little bit of a caveat though. And that caveat is pre-planning for your cycle, your 1 year's cycle for this use of $200,000. So in the ideal world, what we would expect is that this board meets in preparation for the deliberation over what the use of funds will be in a coming fiscal year. And that may end up being an itemized list that ultimately is presented to the county commission for their approval. And when they approve it, it comes through us in that annual application saying we will use the money for example, $50,000 for subgrants to businesses, local businesses. We will use $100,000 towards some development that is in need of the push that goes over the top. Say, for example, some kind of infrastructure that will help develop an industrial park. And then another line item that says we will use $50,000 for another project, whatever that project is. But so you as a body are advising the commission not only at this stage, but you're advising the commission pre application stage where some of those decisions about categories where money and funding will be allocated will occur. And then the commission says, okay, yes, we've got thumbs up there, or no, please tweak it this way, in other words. And then that final application proposal is then sent to us, right? Then when you get down through the work of your year and taking each category, and in this case, for example, what I'm seeing is that you're deliberating over potential applications that will go to businesses for subgrants. That's already been approved at a higher level, saying X amount of dollars is going to go there, right? And now you're working on the processes and potential applications that will ultimately lead to awards, which then again, you're going to propose to the commission and say, under this category that was previously approved by the commission of subgrants, these are the ones we recommend that you approve. And again, they can take that opportunity to say yes or no, or, slight modifications here and there. So I guess we don't want to miss the part about pre-planning the year and how the funds will be allocated in categories. Rather than to come back to the commission and say, we've worked up this program, we've set standards, and we've put out an application, and we feel like you need to approve these things. And that the idea of subgrants was never presented to the commission in the first place, then that's where you're going to run into some challenges. So there is a kind of a symbiotic pre-planning preparation that goes into now what you're deliberating for the use of funds and recommendation to the commission. Hopefully that's a little more clarity.
Yeah, and I'll add in a little bit, just some examples from some other counties that I cover. Not all counties do subgrants, right? Some counties choose to keep portions of that funding internally and use within their economic development department. Some counties choose to automatically set aside funds for business summits. Some counties use it for their industrial park, right? Internally at the county level. So I think that kind of, just adds to what James is saying, is that, and I don't know, because I'm sorry, I've missed these, but, I think the first step is like, obviously, did the commission, decide that subgrants was the way to go for the full $200,000? And then go from there, right?
So, I think the guidance we received from the commission, that wasn't in a formal law or vote, but guidance from the commission at a commission meeting, was to open up the application process and invite folks to apply. And so we're following that guidance very specifically from the commission in doing so. No, that's a total.
I think in the future, I think we should do that. We should just decide what, in lieu of all of the applications that we got, because I had mentioned I would like to see some of that money set aside for internal use, but with all of the applicants that we have, I don't want that to be the case. I think we have a valid point to say we need to fund this department, but going after we finish this and going to next year, let's have a better plan for what we want to do and formally submit that to the commission. That makes sense. I think, I'm obviously new at this, so.
Yeah.
To your point though, Mel, so if you do hold money back for the department, there's less money to be given, so that's tough to go through each of those grants to say, what if they're like, well, we asked for more than what is going to be available, so do those get tossed and maybe next year? Do you see what I'm saying? So that's another thing that is kind of like, we don't even know what money we're dealing with if that's the case.
Yeah,
Well, I think
what I'm
go
saying
ahead.
is not this year, so.
Saying this year, we do have full amount to work with.
Yeah, I think with all of the grants that come in and everything, but after we're done with this and we've recommended the commission that we want to do, that you guys want to do these specific sub-grants or infrastructure, then after we're all done with this process, then for next year, we're going to come back and say, next year, God, we'd really like some help to do this, so Melissa doesn't do it all, let's put aside, we want to recommend to the commission to put aside $25,000 towards staff. We want to recommend to the and we're going to recommend to have this much for sub grants. And so kind of when we talk about looking at these, when we see the results, they're going to be in different pockets, so if we have so we have some really great ones that are under that $10,000 threshold. And so if we make the decision that we're going to fund, up to $50,000 of sub grants, I think that would fall in those categories. And then we'd have the larger one that would, so I, this is new for me. So I think that he's spot on, but we kind of skipped that spot this year, and that's okay because we're just creating a new process. But for next year, we're gonna, and we see why. We see all of this stuff. And so in that, I don't want to recommend that we put money aside for our economic development department for this grant cycle. We'll figure out how to fund it in our budget.
Yeah.
Or we'll request. I think we have a good reason to go to the commission and say, hey, we should fund this department because it's a lot of work. Look at all this stuff. Look at all this follow-up they could do. And then after we're done, we'll talk about if we want to put something up for the
Can I also-
following year.
Well, do you want to go first, Forrest?
I was just gonna ask a follow-up, but you also were gonna make a point.
No, I think for me, what I wanted to clarify is I'm coming more from a place of sensitivity too about. We had so many amazing applications and I feel like we worked really, really hard to cast a wide net. Because we have a little bit of a hump to get over from a perception. And that has been addressed a few times is we want to make sure that this time we pushed it out to as many folks as possible. And we got such amazing applications. And I want to reassure those folks that that isn't a necessary part of the process. It's part of us wanting to open up and getting all the great ideas. And that may not be the process moving forward, or that may not be the best way or a way or whatever, but this is, what we've done. But now that we get to the decision-making part of it, I don't think that those applications need, does that make sense? No, it doesn't.
Not sure.
Yeah, sorry.
Do you think it would be based on the idea or the concern that people who may not be recommended by this committee should not be prohibited from going directly to the commission?
Yeah, I think,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
so are you suggesting, or would a review of the pre-applications with our rating of the top whatever, would it be appropriate for that to go before the commission to update them, give them a sense of the breadth of these applications and the considerations, remembering that we have two different pots of money that we're going for?
Yeah, so on that point, I think it's appropriate. But whatever way we want to do it, I think it's just making it consistent, transparent, and easy for the commission to understand. So if you took these, and we're in the baby stages of it, you took these top 10 applicants and said, hey, commission, here's an update, here's what we've got. We think these are some strong stellar programs. We want to narrow the scope down to them. I think if you did that, gave them all the pre-applications and said, hey, these are our top 10 favorites, back us up on this. And I went to the commission, they said, yep, green light. I think you can narrow the scope.
Melody, do you think that would be helpful for the
I
commission?
don't know that we have, I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, I feel like we're gonna run into challenges time-wise if we keep going back and forth between the committee. I mean, what I would suggest is that we move forward, and what we can say after today, making a decision on how many to push through to the second phase, is we have communication with the applicants that say, these are the ones that made it through to the second phase of consideration by this board. And those will be the only ones considered for a recommendation by this board moving forward.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then we can put a caveat in there, a little sort of disclaimer at the bottom, like ultimate decision will be made by the county commission. Should you choose to submit a full application, it will be forwarded to the commission. We're just letting you know that it won't be receiving a recommendation from this board.
Yeah, I think that covers all of the possible concern, because then somebody can't complain and say, well, I got kicked out early, this is unfair.
Yeah.
I want a backup. And I think that covers everything. And I will say, I was one of the ones that was critical and said, we didn't have as many applicants now. I think you guys have done a phenomenal job. I think you guys have done a stellar job. You have, 50 something applicants. That's phenomenal. You guys should be applauded for that effort. That's wonderful, and I think that's really great to see. So I know that was a comment that I've made in the past of concern, but this number of applicants has made it known that you guys went out, pushed for applications, and really spread the word.
So I have one more thing.
Yeah.
Before we look at these totals. So when we put this out, this call out, we kind of put it out for both grants.
Yeah.
And so we put it out there with the idea that there could be this larger pot. So when we're looking at sub-grants, a lot of them are not meeting that threshold of the RCOG grant. So when we're looking at this and choosing our top 10, I mean, the county already said they don't have a match for the RCOG themselves, so any RCOG applicant would have to have their own match. So one question that came into my head while I was watching the training on YouTube with James, was can the RCG grant be used as a match for the RCOG grant?
Okay,
Thanks.
great. Is that for me?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Sorry, I was on YouTube and I wasn't able to ask at the training.
And that's why I
Yeah.
really wanted him to come today.
Yeah.
That's a really great question. Okay, so let me I think I want to put the horse before the cart a little bit more when it comes to RCOG. While it's not impossible to get a grant for RCOG to do sub grants for businesses within your county, I can tell you it's never happened in the history of RCOG so far. Others have attempted. RCOG has been generally given strictly to a community or a county for their larger economic development projects, not to be subdivided down into subgrants so far. Now, I like I said, it could possibly happen. The committee that reviews those applications may see that would be viable and important to do in your county if that were proposed. But I would say at this juncture, it's probably on a very low probability of occurring or being given. So if we're talking about RCOG, we're really probably be looking at Grand County's big, important either infrastructure or workforce development project that will be directed through and conducted by the county itself and not subgranted to businesses.
I have another question about the matching funds. So can the matching funds come from an asset? So for instance, if they already own the land, but need the grant money to do the project, is that considered matching funds because they own the land already? Can that be a consideration? Or do they have to have cash?
Just within context, the match only is required for the RCOG.
Right,
For these
yeah.
really big
Right,
ones that he's
yeah.
talking about.
Right, this is
Yeah.
the questions that I got during this whole process, and I was like, I don't know, read the thing.
It's a good,
But
it's a
I
good
didn't
question.
say
We do have a list in the information and instructions for RCOG of what your sources of matching funds can be. And generally what we're looking at is a contribution to the project that has not occurred yet. So if somebody owns the land, maybe that wouldn't qualify because they already own it. They're not purchasing it and giving it towards the project.
So maybe if someone has donated them the land, that would make.
or a different LLC sold it to them. Okay,
Yeah, a donation of property would be different than, somebody, a previous owner or an existing owner saying, I've got this at this value, therefore take it as my match. That probably wouldn't go over. But we do have a list of appropriate places to find matching funds. It could be from other grants, it could be from federal money, it could be from your municipal some, development board from a city or something like that. Could come from RDA money, CDA money, anything like that that's has something to do with tax incremental financing that will contribute to a development or something like that. So there's some sources there.
And then, I just want to make another point on one thing that James said, and he can clarify as well, that, the RCOG grant, is, really project focused, one, and, almost entirely, I don't think I can say 100%, but kept like is an actual city project, is a county project. Very rarely is the county applying on behalf of another business, because then, and correct me, James, if I'm saying it wrong, but then all the liability lies on the county, right? If that project isn't completed or if those funds aren't properly used, that all lies within the on the county's shoulders. Is that correct, James?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, just to be clear, there have been a couple of RCOG awards that have essentially been pass-throughs to larger businesses that make a significant impact in a community. That has occurred. However, there's some legal things there that that you have to be very careful with, because the contract is with the county or the community, and the lack of performance on a part of a partner or stakeholder who might be the developer who's getting passed through money, and if they don't do it, then it's the county or the community that's on the hook for the contractual agreement, not the third party. We just had a reimbursement. Here's an example, a reimbursement back from a community up north of $1 million because their developer didn't want to come up with that required $1 million one-to-one match. They just wouldn't do it. Unfortunately, the city had to give us back $1 million. So that's the kind of thing you have to be super careful with on something like that. So what I'm saying is, yes, it's a possibility that you would pass through RCOG money to a larger impactful business that is going to make a real impact in your area, but you have to be able to navigate the legalities of your contract with the state, not their performance. Yeah, and so back to your original question, and then probably you need me to get me out of here so you can continue your deliberations. But can the RCG money be used as match for RCOG? And the answer is to an extent. Yes, we would want to deliberate over the size of your work under an RCOG award and what percentage it lends itself to. We have done it. We have accepted it. Some counties, I'll give you here an example really quickly. There's a huge attempt to develop an agri-park in EOAB County. That's under the 6-county AOG, and each one of those 6 counties agreed to put a portion of their RCG money towards the feasibility study, which was in the millions of dollars for this agri-park. And they did that with their RCG money, and that was acceptable. Just remembering that if you're going to use it in one place, it means somebody else or something else is not going to get done somewhere else. That's why, you want to consider your distribution and your opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
James, for taking the time to be with us today. No, that's super helpful. It really is very helpful to get some of that clarified as we move forward. I think we're ready.
Let's do it.
to look at the results. Suspense has been building.
Thanks, James.
Thank you all.
I let him answer. So
Good.
I can take over now. I'll answer all the easy questions from here on out. I'll try.
So
And this wasn't in the packet?
this did not make it in time to be in the packet, but we can share it
No, you're.
afterwards, obviously. Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of scroll through them so you can see, right?
Well, transparency, Chris, I can't see them really great, so. If anyone wants me to detail it.
Yeah, I mean, the project descriptions, which is the detailed stuff on the right, is you've all read, that's straight, copied straight from the forms that you read. So this is just in order scoring, right? So like Moab Regional Hospital received a 3.64 out of 5, right? Compiling as a composite tabulation of everyone who graded these scores. And then, yeah, the ask is next to it, what their ask was, although there was that caveat there where I think a few of these folks didn't think of it as an ask amount, but rather a total project cost. So we'll refine that as we move forward with these folks.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would love to shoot that number up, up the line so that they know, how great the need is here.
Cool. Yeah, we'll take a look at it even just after this
Yeah.
meeting and try to get you like
Later.
our best
A
number.
total.
If
Okay.
we can't get something, then it'll be
I
next
think
month,
it's
but
important for them to see.
absolutely, I totally agree. Grant County EMS, that larger project is the next up. I'm sorry, that just scrolled all the way down. Moab Area Housing Task Force with their smaller ask for the dashboard. Artesian, which is the press project, a like community space coffee shop type of place, was 3.28. Moab Homegrown Farm, this is the kitchen, an incubator kitchen, 3.2 out of 5. Friends of Moab Folk Festival, it's kind of like growing and promoting the folk festival, 3.18, $30,000 ask. Moab Brewery, 3.14. It's creating a beer garden in the food truck park, is what the ask was basically. Castle Valley Academy, the proposal to establish a freeze drying and food dehydration space in Castle Valley. Ashtec, this is the apprenticeship program. 3.0. Community rebuilds. Diversifying some of their offerings for affordable housing in the community, 3.06. Moab Golf Club working on capital sort of planning and updates to the golf course, 3.03. Radio station KCYN for some equipment, sort of a smaller ask for equipment to improve advertising capabilities. Multi-mini mount, that was the HVAC mount. It's a larger project. I don't know if that's the ask number. That's one of those where there might be a question mark about that. Yeah, exactly. We'll work with them if they get pushed forward, but we're down at number like 13 there. And what we have here listed is down to the top 17. I think that that was partly just the amount of time that we had to compile these and get them ready for you guys to look at. But we thought that was going to give us enough to get a sense of what we're talking about and be able to move forward a discussion about picking a threshold, right? And within that threshold, I mean, I think things to keep in mind is we want to have some projects that should be considered for RCG and RCOG, right? And we want to have enough projects so that if some of them turn out to not be shovel ready, turn out to not be quite, ready for applications to move forward this year, we still have others in reserve, right? So that as we ask them to move forward, we're keeping a robust pipeline for future consideration. Lisa, back to you.
Now, I think the most important thing at this point is just talking about what that threshold looks like and then setting the table for next steps and getting these folks in here. One of the things that we had talked about is, and I don't know how the folks who submitted the applications feel, and I don't know how this board feels, but as we get them to come in and we talk to them and we dive a little bit deeper in the project, there may be opportunities to discover certain things that may change amounts, asks, projects, etc. Like, for example, if something's a really great project and it's not quite shovel ready and they don't have enough information to give a very specific ask on a larger project, it might be that some of that might be dedicated toward feasibility study that would allow them to put together a more solid ask with a lot more research behind it. So I think if we give ourselves enough to be able to leverage some of those and work with them, there may also be opportunity to group several projects together that are further down on the list, but they're grouped together in terms of subject matter or category or impact that they'd have on the community. Maybe they would be interested in collaborating together to be able to create a larger project or whatever. So I think at this stage, what we're choosing is what is the cutoff number of the folks that we want to have provide more detailed information, give us a little bit more of a detailed budget, come in and have a conversation with the board, and then allow us to kind of workshop through those projects to get a little bit of a better understanding moving forward.
I mean, I think what I'm thinking in terms of trying to pick a number is we want to have enough that we have a really strong pipeline, but we don't unnecessarily burden these businesses and organizations, asking them to furnish information and create budgets, you know, when they're not going to have much of a chance. So I mean, I leave it to the board, and I think, somewhere around the top 10 or so would be a reasonable number, but it's up to our discussion. I mean,
Well, we may also have to kind of separate that in between what was obviously maybe more aimed towards an RCOG ask and what would be more for the RCG grant.
yeah, and one of the good things about the way the list I think just turned out is that if you took a top X kind of a number, I think you're probably going to end up with a good mix, because there's a mix of
Well,
projects that fit in both of those categories that did float up to the top. Because that was my initial thought too, was that we're going to need to separate these, and then how do we separate them? And do we
Later,
force them into
probably,
one
but
thing, or look,
We're gonna have to at
so
some
maybe we
point.
don't quite yet have to force them into one category or the other.
I'm a
We
top 12 girl.
Okay.
Because you could do six presentations and 6 presentations. And maybe limit them to, yeah.
I'm in favor of 12 as well. I'm not voting here, but, and I also, I'm happy to see, because I was hoping, and as I read them all, I figured that they would shake out to where we have the ones that are obviously RCOG worthy, and I think they need to be pushed a little bit further. Some of them that only put in like $150,000, but could technically be more than that. Those programs could be like, hey, you could really go after the big one, not the small one. And then we have some smaller ones. We have some 8,000, 5,000, in there as well. So we're getting kind of all of the gamut of helping a few smaller grants, medium, and then bigger and then bigger. So, and that falls, I see all of that in all of these 12 that you just listed,
And what do you
So-
think about like, if what we're looking at as a potential RCOG grant isn't maybe ready yet? Is that something that maybe we don't even, maybe they're not even ready this round? That we can work with
The next time.
for the next
Mhm.
time. If we don't come up with a solid ask for this year for that RCOG grant, we've got a lot of potential projects that we could help or be ready for the next time.
Remind me, that's like the competitive one, correct?
Correct.
So why wouldn't we look at the top 3 at least
For
for
that,
RCOG? Because they're gonna have to come with a pretty darn decent
it's gonna be.
proposal.
Well, like
very
one of the
put
top
together.
3 is only an $8,000 ask. So I don't think that
I mean,
necessarily goes.
I
that
think
way.
she
Right.
meant
You
just
have
for
to
that
separate,
grant though.
I'm
yeah.
saying, but the RCOG, if you do the top 3 that are RCOG, because you can't
Quality.
split that one, right?
No.
I
So
mean,
you might
for
have to go
whatever reason,
further
you can't
down the
split it.
list to find. that.
So
So I think that we'll get that already, basically, because,
I
well,
don't
a
think
couple
it's
of
not
things.
with the top 12. I think you have to go to the 13
Well,
You'd
I
have
don't
to
know
go
about
further.
13. If you want to go to,
What was 13?
because
Oh.
that's, do you see what I mean? 'Cause if you
Yeah.
get top 3
Well-
for the RCOG, then, I mean, and then you have quite a few, which would be I guess that would be 8.
yeah, well, a couple of things there, though. One, based on the guidance we just received,
That probably would apply.
there's one project here that has county backing, right, in terms of EMS, right? So that's the one that's gonna like obviously fit
Right.
based on amount and everything we've just heard. That's probably like the best fitting one, and that it does make a list, right? Whatever number we pick here that we're considering right now, it's going to go forward. And then there are some others that would definitely be more the like stretch type of stuff, but like the hospital one, for example, could be, while the amount that they're asking for here,
It's only a
Right.
planning.
Yeah.
exactly, but it's a project that might be worthy consideration and
like the
having
big
some more
project is
talk,
coming.
whether that's this year or not this year. But I think there are some projects like that where the number that we see in front of us right now is one thing, but that's where I think Melissa's talking, is saying like, as we move forward to this next round, we should have a conversation with them about which grant category is the right category for you,
Oh.
and how should we go
Because if
ahead
they
and
have 2 years to
put
accomplish
together
it,
that ask.
if you have 2 years to accomplish it, and you go get a feasibility study, and then you can start putting infrastructure in the ground, you could easily hit that $600,000 threshold. So there's 2 that are asking for feasibility studies, and so those I look as further than that, not just stopping there, so that we could get them to go, and they're both, and yes, and the golf course is a city, it's owned, it's in the county, but it's owned by the city.
Well, the
But-
land is owned by the city, the club is
It's a
is a nonprofit. Now, one of the things that I found on that one to be interesting is they've actually been losing business a little bit because their infrastructure is so bad that we've seen kind of a dip in like
100%.
all the tournaments that people don't realize how much that brings to our community as far as visitorship. And so I don't know, that one was kind of a tough one for me because I think if it would be a great marketing tool and it would bring more people to our area to spend some money.
Yep, so I think we're all on the great path.
Yeah, so does somebody want to make a motion just to move forward? You would, I would invite such a motion.
I just,
Or an alternate one. Go
well,
ahead.
I just had this thing where it's like, we have, like, that our COG seems like the big institution one, so do we, like, 6 and 6, do we not wanna just push like our institutions for the RCOG forward and then RCG?
Yeah, are you,
Like-
is there an RCOG that you think would get missed? Like project that we need to consider that would get missed by the proposal right now?
Okay, good point, no.
Then, yeah, that's why I think we're okay.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to put this up before we had to make a decision, so it's
Sorry.
because I think we can just kind of bypass some of those challenges by the way that things.
Make a motion to move forward with the top 12 scored projects. And invite them into a broader application process for more information and a meeting with the board.
I second that.
Thank you. We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion?
We look at number 13, see how close that is to number 12.
Sure. I mean, they're all,
Which one is
Oh, it's number 13.
is that,
Moab Mini Mount.
you
It's the
know,
one that like.
but is that actually a mistake on the chart?
So the thing that I thought was interesting about that one was
I think it
it's
looks like a
manufacturing
mistake, too.
business. And
Yes.
so
Mhm.
it's a manufacturing business, that it definitely is a diversification. I don't know if that's like
But
the
that's
county, and maybe Melody can speak to that, but I don't know if that's the county's maybe desire, because that is
State how many jobs that would be created by that.
That's where we
6 to
have to get
8.
more information from the applicants.
It says
Because
that
there were
it's 6 to 8
several
on
where
it.
They actually listed it. A
They
lot of them
did.
didn't, and
They
then-
did list it, and then they
That's
also
important
were explaining
thing.
that, like, so from what I'm understanding of that one is. They have created a product that, on those mini mounts, there's different sizes, and they got a little fed up because they had to keep buying all these, and then they would have to store them and all this stuff, so they bought one that, or they created one, they actually, built it themselves, created one to then, it's a versatile one, so they don't have to, so when all of these HVAC companies are trying to get these mini splits in, they can buy one and it will do all 3 different sizes.
It's universal.
And yeah, it's universal, and so then now they're selling them, and the manufacturing portion is kind of like something in St. George and in China, and now they're trying to bring it here, because they are housed here.
Well, let me just, sorry, but throw out there that I just discovered that those two are incorrectly ordered. And it should be swapped, 12 and 13. So if somebody would like to substitute a motion for 13, I think that's totally appropriate. If you guys want to stick with 12, know that that pushes mini mount over and KCYN down.
I'll substitute to 13.
Okay, so we have a substitute motion. We'll invite a second to that motion if there is one.
One second.
Okay, and now we can still have discussion, so.
Okay, was there, I was trying to follow, was there a reason why you went to 17? Again, can you clarify that?
Yeah, just to give us enough to work with,
Okay,
but limitations on time prevented us from having more. That's all.
And what was the score at that was a 2.5, right? Out of 5 stars, we're 2.5, so we're kind of right at that.
At that.
No, 2.83.
Oh, 2.83.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Would it be more useful to the commission if we went further than that? What is your take on it? That's a lot. I mean, it was so.
I think it's a lot. I mean, I
much.
think that if we asked the commission if they wanted to see all these, they'd be like, no. It's a lot. I think that, you know, that's why there's boards and, you know, that's why there's liaison from the commission and I've talked to some other commissioners, so. I think that wherever you guys want to go, I was just thinking of, you know, if we hit that 2.5 mark or. And I also think the top 13 is good, you know.
I want to say two things. Not necessarily to drive anything, but just listening to the conversation. I'm sensitive to what Stephen said earlier about choosing a number based on the merits or a discussion about the merits of a project. I would rather just say, let's go 12, 15, whatever. Like, I don't know why that makes me a little uncomfortable, but it.
Oh, what's the 2 point, how many is it?
No,
We just go to
you're totally fine.
2.5.
We'd have to calculate more,
Right.
but
Oh, we,
probably
none of
quite.
them,
No, we have that information, but it's not on this
but
list. right here.
17 is, what's number 17?
Number 70 was like 2.8.
Oh,
So
so we're still at
2.83.
And then my other comment is just
Yeah.
sensitivity to the number of folks that we do this to. Because we know that very few of them, only one's gonna get chosen for the RCOG project moving forward. And then maybe, you know, a handful for the other. We're gonna ask you to submit
A lot of stuff.
a lot of stuff. You're gonna have to submit a full detailed budget. You need to come and talk to the
Yeah.
board. You need to.
But it's also like the more folks we invite in, the less time we
Yeah.
have with each of them. So there's just a
Yeah.
balance. It's finding the right. I mean. It's,
Totally,
I think.
and I'm not driving anything, I'm just saying, those are the two
Yeah.
things that I heard that I'm like, I just want to say out loud, we're asking for a lot of work, and we're also talking about merits to determine who comes in, and we may not care about that.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, it's free money.
It's.
So, I mean, if you.
So then
have
the
free
other
money,
thing is,
work for it.
I mean, obviously, a lot of these projects are in towards the targets for the grant. But a lot of them are also from nonprofits. And we have a lot of really great nonprofits, but it seems to me that they are usually like, there are more grants available to them in general than businesses. And that, even though, I mean, I rated a lot of those nonprofits really high because the projects had the merit and it was there. But I kind of feel like this type of grant almost needs to focus more on the people and the businesses that wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity like this.
And I think that's a part for
Sure.
the future.
So yeah, maybe not for the future that we wanna incentivize the private entities more than the nonprofits. Not to get the nonprofits not to apply, but where we would give like a little extra boost in the, you know, rubric.
Well, we have another whole round of this process,
we do.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this, right now, we're just making sure that we have good applications, right? So I think we have nonprofit entities, we have for-profit entities, we have good applications, like,
Yeah.
we've done that part well. And now the question would then be, when we move to the next round and we start to have deliberation about this, then that's the time when you can say, like,
Right.
I think we'll have the most economic impact by whatever. I think we can have space.
And you know,
about
some
this.
counties don't allow nonprofits to apply, some counties do, some counties make their grants specifically for facades or specifically for hospitality, or, you know, that's up for you to structure a house, so definitely something to consider.
Think that too. And as I was looking at them just for future, but let's be quick, it's just, people that just want to get one employee, you know, those are parts I was like, I don't know, because you know, you can only fund, it's one-time funding. And so one-time funding for an employee, for 1 year of an employee's fund, to me, the return on investment isn't super high. So that's one of those things that when I was going through, I was just like, you know, that they were lower on my scale anyways, so.
So we have a substitute motion on the table for 13.
Gosh, that's an odd number, isn't it?
You ready to vote on it or?
Yeah, just real quick. So there's 17 listed here, but there are 56 applications where
Yeah,
all of the rest of them scored.
They were
and
all
fell
scoring
below
lower than
2.9.
that.
Okay, great.
Precisely, yes,
Cool.
yes. Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask a random question? Is there a timeline in which they have to continue to use the funds for, or is there a clawback provision?
So that's up to you, you know, once we distribute the money to you, it's for you to structure your grant program, what works best for the county.
The one thing I would say there, Stephen, is that for RCOG, we can't apply for a new one until we spent down the
Correct.
previous
Yeah,
one, so
that's
it's to our benefit to try to have things move at a
Right,
pretty.
that's
good pace.
RCOG, right?
Yeah.
Because the other one extended.
Yeah.
But even the RCG, we have to have our report filed and completed before we can put in for the next one.
From the previous one?
The next
Yeah,
year.
so we
It
have to
doesn't-
have last year's report done by July, it opens on 5/15, and on July 30th, it has to be submitted so that we can put in for this one.
What if those funds aren't yet spent?
Then we're
It's
in
okay,
trouble.
it's okay. Those funds don't have to be all the way spent.
As long as it's for a specific reason, you can encumber it.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay, because the commission just extended for 2 years.
right. And so we gave the money to you and yours, but you're spending it with that other entity.
But we're going to.
Right.
We're committed.
Yeah, so yes.
So that would just go in the report.
Okay.
But we put that on the report, and then that will be due before we can put in for our next RCG grant.
Correct.
Okay. We ready to move forward to the vote? Let's move forward with the vote. So the motion is by Brittany, yeah, and seconded by Randy. Is for the top 13 projects to move through to the second round of consideration. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. That's unanimous. Thank you. So I think the next thing. I mean, I don't know, should we ask for a motion about what that processing entails, what we're asking for from the folks, or is that something that we'd rather pass back to the subcommittee? I mean, basically, the thought was that we'd be asking for like a 1-pager and a basic itemized budget from each of these folks, and then ask them to attend a session where we can
Ask them
ask some questions, right? I mean, I think that's the concept. I don't know if we need to codify that through a motion or not.
If you have a subcommittee already established to facilitate this process, I don't know the parameters of the original subcommittee.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can just ask the subcommittee, we can add that to the subcommittee's responsibilities with a motion. Okay, so what I would do then is invite a motion to empower the subcommittee that we've already created to design the next stages of its process.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion made, seconded, discussion, call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And any opposed?
Can I?
No, none opposed. The motion does pass. We can fix things if we need to.
One other note, do you want to send out, for these folks that were selected? Is the subcommittee gonna do that?
Like, communicate with them.
And the
Yeah.
communication to the.
Yeah,
to
we
the
need
whole-
we need communication to those who were asking to do
Yeah.
more and to those who we're not asking to do more, the communication we discussed previously.
That would include your.
Right, yeah, I just want to make sure that.
And I
somebody
think the
was doing that.
subcommittee is
I don't know.
empowered to do that, and
Yes.
it would also be, I mean, the staff that we work with, that would obviously be a part of that, and the county should be a part of that process too.
I just want to make sure that everything.
Yeah, no, thank you. Great. Melissa, Brittany and I.
Okay.
Are you trying
Oh, yeah,
to, get on the subcommittee?
No.
That can
She's
happen.
heard ours. So, yeah. As this meeting, secret out, coming up.
Melissa, do you have anything else?
Only one question, and that is if we're gonna go, well, not if, now that we're gonna go with 12, and then we're gonna have the interviews,
13.
13, I'm sorry. Do we think that that's something that we can accomplish all in the next meeting and make those decisions for the next, or do we feel like we
We need
need
a
to
special
do a
session.
special
That's a good question.
session for those interviews?
So we're gonna
So we
have
have like
13.
two meetings for interviews.
I think so,
We
like
might need to, but.
6.5 and 6.5.
Well, it might decline, you never know. One of
One
them
of us
offer out there and one of them might be like, I just don't have time for this year or whatever. So you never know what's gonna happen. And I think it should be closer together. Like, we don't want to do one like 1 week and then 2 weeks later another set, because you're gonna, it'll be fresh, it'll be fresher. No,
Cause what are they gonna get, about 10 minutes each?
Yeah, 8 or 9, yeah.
How
Then
it's sort of
questions.
breaking out in my head visually,
I mean, 3 minutes for
And
presentation,
hopefuls
6
in
minutes for
this.
questions isn't bad.
but we've got 2 more meetings
No.
before recommendation. So if we did groups of interviews, like 2 sets of groups of interviews. And then we have 1 dedicated session to deliberation and decision-making and next steps. And then the next step in the process then would be to finalize those, draft them up and send them off to the commission. How do we see that playing out? Do we need special sessions for that, or do you think we can accomplish it? What do we think?
Then take into consideration. I mean,
I'd say doing one longer meeting is maybe easier than two or not.
oh, that's not bad. You're just adding an
Just
extra,
13.
Like.
add a
starting
little
with
extra
that
time or
3.
start your.
I just suggest maybe having a bonus meeting packed in there because you never know. If, you know, quorum issues, the power could go out or whatever else, if you guys can pack in another meeting just in case, because you'd hate to miss the deadline, because they need to have everything ready.
Well, we could, if we add a little bit of time to our next meeting, then we can always add a special meeting after that if we need to.
You guys meet in 2 weeks or 4 weeks?
For 4 weeks, once a month.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
enough time for the applicants to get you everything. I
That's the
think.
idea.
That's-
That's,
yeah.
have
Well, yeah.
and if we just added 1 extra hour to the meeting, that would
So start at 2 and then.
start at 2 or end at 6, whatever you guys.
Can we front load it
Start
so
at
that
two.
we have time for deliberation and decision making after we do the applications? Does that make sense? So like do the interviews with the applicants first. And then we take the final hour dedicated to discussing and deliberating and making decisions about what we heard.
I thought we were gonna make the decisions at the next meeting.
The following meeting.
Yeah.
If we do them all in extended meetings, will we have time to do that?
Yeah, well, it would.
Okay.
So this is March, right? So in April, we would meet with all the applicants and have received additional information. And that would just mean that then in May,
Okay.
we would make our decisions and make recommendations to the board.
And so
To
we
the
can give
commission.
them a deadline for those materials. Like
Ahead
how
of
long
this.
before our meeting?
Exactly, not so short of
Yeah,
time
yeah.
like we had this last time around. So, I mean, in the next couple of weeks, we'll need to get that stuff in them.
Yeah.
You're only.
But our subcommittee can take care of that part, like
Or at least
the
three,
specifics
like,
of that,
3
at least a
weeks
week ahead of time.
Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Your only headache again, I'm just the
Mhm.
doomsday sayer. After you interview everyone. You want to make sure that the communication, if you have communication with applicants after the fact, while you guys are still deliberating,
Mhm.
just.
You just have to be careful about it.
Be aware of it.
Yeah.
Again, I don't believe anything's gonna happen, but of course, if somebody sees somebody else somewhere, then that means, you know, conspiracy, et cetera. So I just say that once you do that, I think it's really hard to put. All the, you know, this is a volunteer board, and if you guys give them 4 weeks to put the application in, they're probably gonna be 13 applications, 100 pages each, like 1,000 pages. I don't know how many pages.
I think you limit the number of.
Well, I mean, depending on financial reports and everything else, I don't know what you're gonna request.
The final ones that come from the county will be those really full
Right.
applications. We're asking for something.
I'm
much
just
smaller than
envisioning
that.
you guys reading all of it in the same meeting that you make your decision. So that's why I was saying.
No,
maybe-
Oh, no.
we-
That's
The
what I'm
material that-
sensitive to, and I don't love the idea of extra meetings, but I also know, here's what I know is gonna happen without fail. And again, if we can accommodate it in one meeting, I am all about it. But once we get those budgets, once we talk to them, once we have questions, there's gonna be research that we're gonna wanna do and track down that we're not gonna have access to until we hear them talk. Like, things are gonna come up for the first time. And they're gonna be like, oh, I didn't think about that. I need to research, but don't worry, I'll get pre-bids or I'll do whatever. I worry that if we don't build in something up front, I would rather have a meeting in the back where we're just sort of, you know, expanding things that we have to say, but that we don't require new information. And if that's not a fear of everyone else, we all know that this is how I manage my anxiety.
No, so wait, so Melissa, so based on what you're saying, I mean, I think it's a good point, but we would need to then have space after we do the interviews before
Yes.
deliberation.
Yeah.
Which is to say, having time in between. So if there was something that came up, a subcommittee could deal with it, or there could be communication to all the board members. I mean, that would be important, right? So I think that reinforces the idea that we do a long meeting in April to have the interaction with them. And then give ourselves a month in between before we have to make decisions so that
They
any
can
loose
get
ends
more
can get tied
information
up
to
if
us
there's,
or-
if there are loose ends.
And if we have 13 people times 9 minutes, that's 120 minutes, so that's 2 hours, and we have an extra hour and also extra space. Some people are gonna take more time and others are gonna take less. But then we still have that time to come back and say, I would like to have more information on XYZ
Okay.
before we move forward.
Yeah. we can
So
do
I
that
think
next
there's still
meeting too.
room in a
Great.
3-hour meeting, there's still room for us to talk to them all and have time to discuss and decide if we need some more additional information
Yeah.
before our next meeting. And if we need to input a bonus meeting at that point in time, we can schedule that as well. We all have time to talk about that.
Sounds great.
I can ask like 3 more questions. So you guys are gonna meet again and you're gonna narrow it, you're gonna have the 13%. And then that's the meeting, you'll deliberate, discuss and narrow it again and then have one more meeting? or is it from the 13 to the recommendation?
13 to the recommendation.
Okay, let me ask one more question. What happens, and hypothetical, what happens if a board member wants more information from a particular applicant? How do you guys want to have that organized so that it's consistent? So all the board members know, like, oh, if I have a question for Habitat for Humanities, how do I ask?
Yeah.
It doesn't go through the subcommittee, does it go directly?
That's what we're gonna decide after we've
Okay,
done the interviews, so that we have that, so
Yeah,
we
so
can make that on a real basis rather than a hypothetical
Do we
basis.
want to schedule that a meeting, just so
Because
it's
we
all
can
on our
always cancel it
calendars,
if
we
we
can always
need to.
cancel it, but if we want to put a meeting out there for after we have a meeting at the end of
Is that like?
April. So April, the date that our next meeting is gonna be is, we have a bonus Wednesday, so we can do the next Wednesday. So the 30th would be our actual, is it the 4th of the month or the last Wednesday of the month?
It's the last one. We've switched
Oh, wow,
to
we
the
have
last to
5
make it
weeks
more
then.
simple.
So the last Wednesday of the month is April 30th, so we have 5 Wednesdays in April, so we wouldn't be getting these applications back for 5 weeks. Which is fine, because that gives them extra time, gives the subcommittee time to get the paperwork together, it gives them 3 weeks to get their stuff. So then if we had a meeting scheduled like this first week of May. For a bonus.
Like a provisional
For a
meeting put
provisional
on
to
this
like-
calendar on the 7th.
Sure.
May 7th.
First Wednesday?
Okay.
First Wednesday, May 7th.
Again, I don't want to belabor, but I do want to be really sensitive to, again, it's the county that's on the hook. And it's this board's role to not only just choose and make recommendations, but also to make sure that those projects are structured and can be reported on. And so we want to get loving arms around them as much as we can to make sure that we're really vetting and, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll do the process, and then we'll do even more of that after we've made a recommendation and the commission has chosen applicants, right? I mean, then there will be the next phase of getting their applications actually ready.
So the one you guys are going to present to the commission on the 20th, May 20th, is that the meeting?
No, because our meeting in May will be on the 28th. So it'll be the following.
June 3rd is when, okay.
So we decided May 7th at 2.
Is our backup slot, yeah.
And are we doing
At 2 or at 3?
on the 30th?
Is that,
3 hours on the 30th.
right, so
2 to 5 or
2 p.m. to 6.
Okay.
Sounds like people can probably, is 3 to 6 better?
Maybe it's better.
Can people do that?
Yeah, I know, I'm like, do any of you?
I'm like, yeah. maybe 6 is better for thinking about it.
Wait, what did we decide then? Sorry.
3 to 6
3 to 6. Okay,
for our next meeting, so 1 hour tacked on the end.
okay. And then May
And then
7th
on
is
the
what?
7th, what time?
Regular time would be,
3 to 5.
yeah, we'll cancel it if we need to.
I think we're gonna need that hour for those applications.
Yeah.
I think we're all gonna have questions on each one of those, and it's gonna take time to work our way through it.
Definitely. No, it's smart to have it.
Yeah.
If we need it, we'll use it.
When is the next meeting? Sorry, the 28th?
So the 28th is our scheduled meeting. I'm sorry, I'm on
The
the
30th.
the 30th
And then somebody said.
is our scheduled meeting, so we'll add an extra hour at the end of that.
So through the 6th?
Yeah. And then on the 7th, we'll block off another 2 hours from 3 to 5. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. I think we're good to move on to the next agenda item. We might even wrap up early, which would be ridiculously amazing. But this will take some discussion. We can choose to act or not on this agenda item. This is. Hope I haven't them printed. I think I do. I put together goals for the year. They're kind of like, these are basically my goals for the year, right, for this board. And they may or may not be everyone's. I'd like to get your feedback on them at a minimum. And if we choose to codify them as the official, goals for the year of the EOAB, great. And if we're, not there, that's fine too. We can have continued discussion on this. But basically, I mean, they're not complicated. The first one is to run this grant cycle really successfully, right? And I think we're doing a great job of moving that direction. I think the goal should not only be to get really good projects and get that money to Grand County, but also to be setting up a template for how this can be managed in the future. So that's, I think, something we're already working on. The next one is kind of like finishing that whole general plan process that we began. I mean, we did the whole big strategic planning process, got Trail to Tomorrow created. It's sitting there and we're using it, but it's not sort of officially endorsed yet by the county. Also, the general plan called for an update to the general plan after a strategic plan was put in place. And we've got a lot of the work done. There's just a little bit more that needs to happen so that we can then get something in front of the commission for their consideration. So that we can have, I mean, I think ideally have in this year an endorsement from the commission on an actionable economic development strategy so that next year when we say, you know, does a project fit with the goals of the county, we're talking about something really specific and actionable that's tailored to what we're trying to accomplish as a county. The third one is to build economic development capacity at the county. Obviously, over the last little while, things have shifted in terms of where these, you know, where economic development issues are sitting, where our board's sitting within the county. I have already gone and had some conversations with some commissioners to try to gauge interest in having an economic development position reconstituted within the county. And the guidance that I've sort of been given through these conversations has been to go through the budget process this year. I think that will, you know, it may or may, it's unclear exactly how much this board needs to do to set that up, right? I mean, I think the Commission Administrator's Office is already, you know, able and has capacity to, they're going to develop their budget request as an office. And so maybe this already just sort of fits in there and we just endorse it. Or maybe we need to do a little bit more work to make sure that strategy and budget line up together. But I'd really like to make sure that the county has really strong capacity to act on all of these important issues and work with all these organizations that we're reaching out to right now going forward. And then finally, it's just to serve as like the meeting space, right? The hub for economic development in the county. Something I think we're already doing. You know, an example of that is like we're trying to bring in Todd from the SBDC, who just started at USU recently, to have a conversation with us, right? Make sure that we're feeding him businesses that could use his support, that he's connecting people with us if they should be applying for a grant, things like that. I think that's a role that we can play really well as a board and just as a part of the county. So yeah, I invite your feedback. Are the things I'm missing, or the things that, you know, is that not stuff that you guys think we should be doing? So, yeah.
I think on point 3, where you have the build economic capacity.
Yeah.
You know, you guys are staff right now. Are you guys keeping track of like how much hours? You know, I think there's a thing where we should be like, you can go to the county and be like, hey, this took 100 hours this year. Each week that took that, and then like, you know, anything above and beyond like volunteer person, should that hour be recorded for like a staff to like be like, how do we need a full-time? Do we need a Vista volunteer that does this on the week? You know, like what do we need? You know? So
yeah,
I think that would be my thing.
a lot of sense.
I just want to make sure that Quinn doesn't fall over backwards, because I also has immediate reaction to county.
No, I think that's actually a good idea. I think we haven't, no, I haven't tracked. No, I haven't tracked anything, but I think that's a
track our time.
Is she?
It's great.
So no, I think that's a great idea. I think it's relevant, should be tracked.
And I think to your point, we need to include volunteer time.
Yeah,
This is
we know,
up to
like
your
Lisa
board.
just put in like a 40
Well,
hour week.
the subcommittee alone, you know, put in, it appears from the product, 100 or more hours of work, with Dana's help. So I think we need to consider that part of the price.
Yeah, no, and we all want to volunteer our time,
Right.
but it would make sense going forward for that to be a burden that are shared.
But there were some of the things that we just did that couldn't just be like one person doing.
Right.
either.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I think these are right on target. They're specific enough and general enough to give us the direction to go.
Yeah, because what I would do with these is use these to help us schedule our agenda for the rest of the year, right? Sort of like be planning ahead, thinking about when different deadlines are that we need to be reaching.
Yeah, I think James Dixon scheduled our entire year.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a big one. That's a big one. And that's why I put that as number one. I mean, because that's like the reason this board, I mean, this board needs to exist for the reason number one.
Right.
And nothing else on the list.
We may not get to
can
everything
take
else,
away from
yeah.
that. But I think they're important things that we could do to help strengthen economic development of the county.
And we can find ways to work them in as we go through the grants as well.
Do we want to adopt them as our goals of the board?
I'll move to adopt them.
Moved.
I'll second.
Randy seconds it. Any discussion? Melody, do you have any concerns about
No.
those?
Nope, I think we talked about them
Yeah, I just
prior,
wanna make
yeah,
sure.
yeah, we talked about them, and of course, number one's first, and you know, when you only meet once a month, it's hard to get a lot of things done, so, you know, and this is a big project, and it's new, and it's different, so. So I think 4 is simple goals, and they're not really that simple. I'm really
Exactly.
proud of all of you, and I'm impressed by all of you, so, good job.
Thanks. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Let's have a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Passes unanimously. Let me just see if I'm missing anything on the agenda.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Would you want those uploaded into the minutes?
I think that's a good idea.
Uploaded into the packet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll put it out, yeah. There it is. I'm on the wrong.
I have a comment.
Great. Go ahead.
My
If you-
comment is, I just appreciate what Melissa did here. It was really nice to be able to see. Like just even my Facebook post and other posts, I mean, that did cast a big old wide net, and I know it was a lot of work. But I appreciate you making it simple with like doing a lot of the scoring and all of that stuff. That took, I bet, a bunch of minutes, so thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you a
for
ton.
that, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate everything that everybody put in with all the flaws and everything that we learned, like, we've gotta do it once before we can figure out how to do it better, so you have both my apologies and my gratitude for stepping through that process, and Quinn, you're grinning, but you know what I'm really grateful for you and Dana, so. thank you.
Consideration of future agenda items. Anything you guys want us to throw out there? I mean, I think.
To present on the Ready Grant. I don't think I have, right?
No,
Okay, good. I would like to present on the Ready Grant.
great. Thank you. We'll add that to the agenda.
Actually, what day is the next meeting?
It's April 30th, and we're gonna be really busy then.
I know.
And
So
then-
yeah, put me on later.
Later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Later.
I
Great.
would
That's
like
fine.
consideration on, maybe workshops for this next process, like this process was like all brand new and it was infant and we were, I mean, like amazing, right? But I do think, when people kept coming to ask me, granted, I was new too, so I'm like, oh, I don't know, read the paper, read the little thing. But I think workshops might help with how to narrow down better, maybe in the future, so.
So you're
that's
talking about like, kind of like,
about
yeah,
our
before we
process.
do this
Like the
process next time
process.
around, let's have a workshop to improve
Refine
the
our
process.
Yes.
From it and improve it 100%.
So we can use
that
it
sounds
for
great.
years, or whoever, maybe not us, but yeah.
Yeah.
And also another idea is San Juan County actually does workshops for applicants.
That's
Yeah.
what I see, yes.
Workshops, right.
So that, so you guys can, maybe break up and host, I mean, their economic development department does all the grant stuff themselves, and the board just kind of says, yeah, it's a good application or not, so it's a little bit different here. But they do host different workshops where they invite applicants to come and they can kind of help walk them through the process. And this is the first year they've done it, and it was highly successful.
Yeah.
I bet.
Cool.
And you could tell a very big difference between the folks who came and attended those workshops and how strong their applications were as opposed to those who didn't.
And are those live? We can watch them? Are they fine?
No.
No.
Well, they're over,
That's a
they're
great
over.
idea, though.
But
That's
yeah.
Like if they have it
Yeah.
recorded, we could go back and watch it.
Or make a
the other
frequently asked
applicants who
questions
couldn't make
list
it could
or-
go and watch it.
Yeah.
Get the info.
Yeah, and you guys have, your YouTube all hooked up to your, yeah, no.
Oh, dang it.
We're still.
Now we can learn a lot.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
That's,
I
their
think-
economic development director created the entire grant program. And, you know, they do it all staff wise. Their board is not involved in that process. They just score the applications and give a recommendation.
I mean, that's something for us to think of is how we want to organize it in terms of once we, with staffing and everything, these are, you know, we can think about.
Yeah, and I'm
stuff
always
together.
happy to provide information like this. I actually helped revamp the, you know, help build with our staff when I was at San Juan County, that program. And then my other counties also do this program. So I'm always willing to help
No, we want you to be a part of that. stuff where
share
we
best
sort of
practices. I
replan
just don't want
next
you
year.
to take my advice always though. Hey, take your own
Most of the
advice,
time, most of
but I'll just give you, you know, some ideas from other counties. Yeah.
That'd be great. That would be really,
Yeah.
well, thank you all. So like seriously, for all the board members that spent all the time reviewing the applications, I mean, that, I know it's again, was a big time commitment, more than was maybe expected initially. But I think it's really worthwhile and we're coming towards really strong results as a result of it. So yeah, again, thank you so much. And with that, we adjourn.
Thank you.
Do you need a motion to?
I don't think we do.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure we can just adjourn.
You're correct.
Cause I don't know.
My house.